Hi folks, I want to tell you about my second record that I made on Earwig. That was Old Friends with Honeyboy Edwards, Sunnyland Slim on piano, Kansas City Red on drums, Floyd Jones on bass and second guitar, Big Walter Horton on harmonica. And they all sung tracks that they wrote during this on the record, and it's a really neat album. I had a lot of fun doing it. Thinking back on it, I remember so many things. I have so many memories of each of those guys. In 1972, I moved to Chicago from Pittsburgh, and I got into the blues scene. I came here because I wanted to hang out in blues clubs. I got here in June of '72, and in November of '72, I met Honeyboy Edwards and Jim Brewer. Before that, I'd met a lot of other musicians because I was going out to the blues clubs 3 to 7 nights a week. But I met Honeyboy in November of '72, started hanging out with him, playing harmonica with him. And through him, I met Sunnyland Slim and his friends, Floyd Jones and Big Walter Horton. I met Kansas City Red separately at a blues bar on the west side of Chicago, which is a whole other story. Anyway, during the time, by the time I started my first session, I had met Bob Kester from Delmark Records and a jazz record mart. He was a mentor of mine in the record business, and he had told me, if you're going to have a label, you got to have 2 records, because otherwise you don't have a catalog. So after I did the Jelly Roll Kings, I had to have a second record. Well, a light bulb went on in my head after I had been hanging around Sunnyland and Honeyboy and Floyd Jones and Kansas City Red and hearing Big Walter in the clubs, sometimes with Sunnyland and sometimes with Floyd Jones. I realized from their history that each of them had known each of the others and had played with each of the others, but never as a quintet. Honeyboy played with all the others, Walter played with all the others, Sunnyland played with all the others, Kansas City Red had played with all the others, Floyd Jones had played with all the others. Sometimes they played in combinations with each other, but they had never played live or in a studio in a quintet. So I decided that would be a really neat experiment to get all of them on a record together. And I figured that their friendship and their chemistry, personal chemistry, and their knowledge of each other's music could be a really neat recording session. So that's how I came up with the idea for Old Friends. I had Jim O'Neill write the liner notes. Jim was one of the founders of Living Blues magazine, still active in the music business as a researcher, and still a friend of mine, as is Bob Kester. And Jim knew the history even better than I do, still does. So he wrote the original liner notes. Since that time, that record was recorded in 1979 and 1980. It would have been done in '79, but Big Walter skipped town during the first session and went to the Blind Pig club in Ann Arbor, Michigan to play a gig there, and I didn't know it ahead of time. So he wasn't at the first session, which is why he's on part of the record, not the whole album. And those guys at Blind Pig, from their recordings they made of concerts in their club, they started their record label. And they're a great Chicago blues label also. Anyway, I digress, which I tend to do because these records bring up so many memories for me, and I have lots of stories which you'll be hearing about. Anyway, we got an Old Friends record session, and of course Sunnyland was the patriarch of the scene, older than everybody else, so everybody listened to him and followed his lead as he was able to play in a way that helped everybody keep time, because each of those guys, except with the possible exception of Big Walter, had some eccentricities in their timing, especially Honeyboy and Kansas City Red. But it was funny in the studio to listen to all of them sort of grumble and tease each other, especially about Honeyboy and his timing, which to this day still is unusual. And if anybody out there is watching this and has seen our show, me and Honeyboy's show, or played with us, you know that Honeyboy's timing is a throwback to the earliest days of the blues. Anyway, the session went great. It was a lot of fun. I got tunes that had never been recorded by those guys and released. I have a really fabulous record with everybody on there playing together. There are no overdubs on that record, and it's a wonderful experience of the way Chicago blues was in the early heyday of electric Chicago blues in Chicago, and even before that when it was in Memphis and West Memphis, Arkansas. So I know you're going to love the record. It's called Old Friends, and it came out in 1981, right after Big Walter Horton died, and it's just a wonderful listening experience. And the only person left on that session is Honeyboy Edwards, and he's still going strong at 95, playing as well or better than he was back then. So check out Old Friends. I know you're going to love it. I love it. And the musicians and I had a wonderful time. Honeyboy and I still reminisce about that session.